Good morning, Year 11, and welcome today to your screencast for Conflict and Tension, looking at the structure of the League of Nations. So, if we think about the structure of the League of Nations, we can definitely link in to the previous screencast on, just the beginning of the League of Nations, thinking about the structure and organisation of the League and who is even in the League of Nations at this point. So, if we remember this image that we looked at in screencast, our lesson 6, we can remember that the fact that Germany and Russia were not allowed to join the League of Nations. So if you want more information, obviously look that up and watch lesson 6. So that's part of the structure of the League. We also know that the Covenant was part of the structure of the League, where we've got this is the way to deal with warring nations through moral condemnation, mitigation, so talking, money, so economic sanctions, and the military. But we also know that the USA did not join the League of Nations, which meant there was real problems with the Covenant, especially around economic sanctions, the fact that nations could just trade with the USA, and that means the economic sanctions of the League had no impact. So, as a result of the League of Nations structure, and specifically the Covenant, the League of Nations was shown as quite weak, and we can see this here in this image as the League is shown as a rabbit, which is a weak animal. And we can see the snake here is called international strife. So strife means trouble. So we've got trouble staring the League of Nations in the face. So we can see at the time that they're not being attacked, but they're having like a face-off. So we're having a face-off. And we can see down here it says moral suasion. And the rabbit says, my offensive equipment practically nil. It remains for me to fascinate him with the power of my eye. So basically it's saying my offensive equipment being practically nil, I have no weapons. I can't stop international strife with my military sanctions. I don't have the military. I can't stop it with economic sanctions because, and that's a form of offensive strategy, because countries will just trade with the USA, so economic sanctions don't work. So it remains, and they can ignore moral condemnation and mitigation. So it remains me to fascinate him with the power of my eye. It remains for me to try and psychologically make this international strife, these aggressive countries think that we will take action, that we are strong, when actually we have no real power. And that's kind of the message of this source. More examples of the structure of the League of Nations then, and this more goes into what is part of the League of Nations. More of it's like organisation. So we've got in the top left hand side here, we've got the Assembly, which is all the nations of the League coming together. We have on the right hand side here the council members. So there's 4 permanent council members who are basically the most powerful nations in the League, and that's Britain, France, Japan, and Italy. We've then got down here the Court of International Justice, so you can just say it's the League of Nations Court. And then on the bottom right, we've got the Special Commissions, which is how they plan to help people from across the world. But there were problems with each one of these. So the Assembly was a significant problem for the League of Nations because it only met once a year. And that is obviously very negative because it means the League's extremely slow. For example, can you imagine if Britain was invaded in 2025 and they had to wait an entire year for nations to even meet and discuss what to do? It just wasn't acceptable. It's slow, and it made countries really lose faith in the League because it couldn't take quick action. And I would always be linking everything to do with the League with the fact that the USA didn't join, and say, well, you know what, if the USA had joined, potentially here what they might have done is they might have set different rules. They might have had a quicker response. So we could definitely be talking about that there. I would also be saying, there's the council. Is it a little bit elitist, the fact that there's an assembly and that there's a higher rank, suggesting that it might be a two-tiered system where they have strength and they're looking out for each other, these strong countries could definitely suggest this. The Court of International Justice was also negative because they could give advice, but they couldn't make laws. And that means they could be ignored. And we also have the special commissions then. And the special commissions are where people wanted to be helped, but there were negatives. And the negatives come through these two examples from the Economic and Financial Committee and the Opium Board, which we're going to look at in a future screencast when we look at the negatives of the League of Nations. So overall then, the structure of the League of Nations, the organisation of the League of Nations was really, really weak. And it was weak for many reasons. It was weak because nations that weren't allowed to join, such as Russia and Germany. It was weak because the USA didn't join, and it was weak because of the time it took the assembly members to meet. It was weak because of the Permanent Court of International Justice, and it was weak because its special commissions didn't always work. And then the council members were a little bit elitist. There's a two-tiered system within the League of Nations, making weaker countries feel ignored and devalued.